part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Dennis Manoloff Show, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. It's been a while. I apologize for sure. My throat has really been giving me problems, and that's the main reason I was not able to be with you over the past few weeks. I'm trying to manage it. I'm not trying to be whiny, but I'm just trying to explain why I had this absence. And hopefully I've stumbled into a medication that will help the throat. I don't want to name it because I don't want to sound like a doctor playing one on a podcast show, but we shall see going forward. But at least I had enough of a voice box to go to work today with producer extraordinaire Jordan Powell. We tape on Monday, the Monday after Championship Sunday in the NFL. And if there's any doubt as to why Kenny Rhoda and I and many others use the term OIC, that doubt should have long ago been erased, okay? OIC is one of the greatest inventions. I believe that Press Play Podcast's own Kenny Rhoda invented the term. Now, maybe somebody will challenge me on it, but the first time I heard it used was by Kenny Rhoda. OIC only in Cleveland. And it is absolutely brilliant to summarize the frustrations of Cleveland sports fans, specifically Cleveland sports fans of the three major professional sports: Cavs, Indians, Browns. Of course, the Indians are now the Guardians. And what's important to remember, and sometimes people forget when we throw the term OIC out there, we hashtag it OIC, is that we're not saying, Kenny was not saying, and I agree with him, I say we because I kind of glom on to Roadman's genius, but it's not meant that to say that only in Cleveland does this happen or that happen or this happen or that happen. Other cities have crazy stuff happen to them in the world of sports. That's a given. The OIC is about cumulative. It's about the fact that these things happen in Cleveland over and over and over and over to the point where no other city can challenge Cleveland for OICs. And here you have it again on championship weekend, as crystallized as can be. You go into the day and you have the Cincinnati Bengals playing the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC title game, and then the Los Angeles Rams playing the San Francisco 49ers in the NFC title game. If you're a Browns fan and you subscribe to OIC, what are you thinking? You're thinking that somehow, some way, the Cincinnati Bengals are going to win in the AFC and the Los Angeles Rams are going to win in the NFC. Why? Well, the answer on the AFC side is easy because it's the AFC North champion, the Cincinnati Bengals, that you're talking about. Not the Browns, the Bengals. Okay? Think about where we were just one season ago. The Bengals were 4-11-1. Last place in the AFC North. The Cleveland Browns were 11-5 and had earned a wild card berth. The Browns were a team on the rise. And they proved it by going to Pittsburgh and beating the Steelers in the wild card round. They beat Ben Roethlisberger in Heinz Field in a playoff game. The only playoff game that Roethlisberger played against the Browns, and he lost it. So we have that over him. But The Browns won the wild card. Then they went to Kansas City and lost the divisional round. And even though it was a bitter pill to swallow, most people in Northeast Ohio were thrilled with the Browns season, regardless of that it ended with a thud, 22-17 to the Chiefs in Arrowhead. And all the talk, not only here but nationally, was about how the Browns were going to take the next step in 2021. They were going to not just get to the playoffs, they were going to, knock down doors and get to the Super Bowl. This was a Super Bowl worthy roster with a Super Bowl worthy coaching staff. So what do the Browns do? They go 8-9 and finish out of the money. Don't even make the playoffs. Meanwhile, the Bengals, coming off 4-11-1, have the number one overall pick from 2020, Joe Burrow, as their quarterback, entering his second season in 2021. And, okay, the Bengals were supposed to be improving, and you liked what you saw from Burrow at LSU. You liked what you saw from Burrow in his rookie year in Cincinnati, albeit, truncated by that gruesome leg injury. But you weren't even sure how Burrow was going to respond to the gruesome leg injury. And you didn't know what the Bengals were going to look like, but you certainly didn't think they were going to, push the Browns or the Ravens. Some people thought they would be better than the Steelers because some people thought the Steelers were going to be horrible. But at the very least, at the highest, their ceiling was going to be third in the AFC North, except it wasn't. The Cincinnati Bengals went 10-7 and won the AFC North, with Joe Burrow returning to health and looking great. And then in the playoffs, they played host to the Las Vegas Raiders in a wild card round and beat them. They went to the number one seed Tennessee Titans. Titans coming off a week rest. They were the bye in the AFC. Beat the Titans. And then they went to Arrowhead in the AFC title game and beat the Chiefs. Beat Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Oh, by the way, beat Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs for the second time in 5 games played. The penultimate game of the regular season. Chiefs. Bengals in Cincinnati. Chiefs dominate early. Bengals rally late. And that's all she wrote for the division. They win the division by virtue of that rally over the Chiefs. So then we're told, you know what? That was the regular season. That was in Cincinnati. This will be at Arrowhead for the AFC title and for the trip to the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, ETN, all these guys. They're going to be ready. And you watch, they're going to take apart the Bengals this time. And they're so tested and so experienced. And they've been to the previous 2 Super Bowls. They won it 2 years ago. It's going to be a totally different story in Kansas City. Well, guess what? The Chiefs got out to a 21-3 lead in their building and proceeded to blow it. That is OIC right there in a nutshell. Only in Cleveland does the AFC North Division quote-unquote rival from down 71 rise from 4-11-1. And by the way, the previous season, 2-14. So in the previous 2 seasons, a combined total of 6 victories. Only in Cleveland does that team not only surpass the Browns in the standings, but win the division while the Browns don't go anywhere but home, and then proceed to run the table through 3 playoff games and get to the Super Bowl. So Joe Burrow will be playing in a Super Bowl in his second season in the NFL. The Cleveland Browns have never played in the Super Bowl, period. Full stop. Never. And Joe Burrow's in it his second season. That's OIC, especially when you know that Joe Burrow is Ohio born and bred, Ohio high school legend, went to Ohio State, got beat out by Dwayne Haskins, transferred to LSU, smartest movie ever made. Don't tell me, oh, you know what, he found it too tough at Ohio State. So, no, he did the right thing for himself. And guess what? It turned into an undefeated season at LSU, a Heisman Trophy, major bank by being the number 1 overall pick in the draft in 2020. So Burrow made the right decision to get out of Ohio State. But here's what I love about Burrow. He embraces his Ohio roots and his Ohio State time. He doesn't distance himself from it just because he was a transfer. And that's why a lot of us like Joe Burrow. I love Joe Burrow. And I'm sitting there going, the Bengals have Joe Burrow and the Browns have Baker Mayfield. The Bengals have the number 1 overall pick in 2020 who took his team to the Super Bowl in 2 years. The Browns have the number 1 overall pick in 2018 who has won 1 playoff game in 4 seasons. And this team is not sniffing the Super Bowl anytime soon, or so you would think, at least coming off of this year. Maybe they can turn it around right quick like the Bengals did. Who knows? But I have my doubts because I'm so tired of watching the Browns flop and fizzle. And I know. You say, well, what did you expect Baker to do? How is he possibly going to get this team to the Super Bowl so quickly, given what he inherited? Well, you know what? Joe Burrow didn't exactly inherit a mansion, okay? As I said, 2-14 in 2018 or 2019, and then 4-11-1 in 2020. Joe Burrow was coming into a situation that looked problematic and looked like a rebuild, and he's in the Super Bowl. He's Joe Cool. He's being compared to Joe Montana, Joe Namath. He's smoking cigars. His teammates love him. And we're sitting here looking at an 8-9 team in Cleveland that has all sorts of issues. That's OIC. And that's what causes those of us who care to pull our hair out, because we just cannot believe this is happening. And I've said it. I don't like the Bengals, but I love Burrow. And I don't like the Bengals, but I detest the Ravens and the Steelers. So I can actually stomach the Bengals going to the Super Bowl, whereas I couldn't stomach the Ravens and the Steelers. Never can, never will. Burrow, though, I want to see have success. The question is, how much success? Do I want the Bengals to be Super Bowl champs? Not really. But guess what? If they're not the Super Bowl champs, who is this season? Oh, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, the Los Angeles Rams. And who do the Los Angeles Rams feature on their receiving core behind Cooper Kupp? Because we know Cooper Kupp is the Triple Crown winner, and he's incredible, and he's the key to that offense. But a very nice compliment to Cooper Kupp is Odell Beckham Jr. Yes, what do we have for the losers, Judge? Odell Beckham Jr., the former Cleveland Brown, and not former Cleveland Brown from 10 years ago, not former Cleveland Brown from 5 years ago. This is the former Cleveland Brown from this season. You can't make this stuff up. This season, the Browns had Odell Beckham Jr. Traded for him in the offseason between 2018 and 2019. From the Giants, he comes to Cleveland. A lot of fanfare, transcendent talent. Oh, my gosh, the Browns have their number 1 wide receiver for years. He's going to be reunited with his former college teammate and best buddy, Jarvis Landry. First season for Odell, 1,000 yards. Not a great season, but not a bad season. 1,000 yards for Freddie Kitchens. And Kitchens one season as head coach. Season goes south, 6-10. Kitchens fired. Dorsey, the guy who, orchestrated the trade to bring Beckham in here. But I mentioned the 2019 first season for Beckham in Cleveland because it didn't get any better for Beckham after that. Astonishingly, it didn't get any better for Beckham. Say that 10 times. New regime comes in. Andrew Barry, GM, and Kevin Stefanski, head coach. Stefanski, rookie or coach of the year in 2020, as the Browns won 11-5, as we said, won the AFC wildcard round, lost the division round. But Odell Beckham Jr. in the Kevin Stefanski system, for whatever reasons, whether it was Stefanski, whether it was Baker, it just didn't click. It didn't mesh. It didn't work. Period. His 2 seasons under Stefanski, Beckham's 2, were just not good at all. He didn't catch a lot of balls. He didn't, catch for a lot of yards. He didn't catch a lot of touchdowns. He was just another guy. JAWR, just another wide receiver. And so you're sitting there and you're going, man, 2020, maybe it took him some time to acclimate to Stefanski, but by 2021, they'll have everything ironed out. They never did. Beckham was still lost, and he was a ghost, really, in the Cleveland offensive scheme. So what do you do then if you're Odell Beckham and you're facing a second consecutive season of not doing a lot on the field, and you're seeing your team not, in this case, in the 2021 case, losing or not winning enough? Well, if you're Odell Beckham Jr., you want out. And then, as we know, the whole campaign started with his dad and putting the mixtape together of how many times Odell was open and all this stuff. So one thing led to another. Odell pouted enough that the Browns barred him from the facility, and within a week, Odell was released. And then, or put on waivers after being released. And then he had to clear waivers. Well, he let it be known, any of those scrub teams that wanted to claim him, don't waste your time because he's not going. He's not going to report. So the scrub teams don't take him, and he becomes a free agent, and he signs with the Los Angeles Rams. Helps the Rams finish the regular season. They were going to go to the playoffs with or without Odell. But Odell was a part of the solution toward the end of the regular season. And then he's played really well in the postseason, and the Rams are going to the Super Bowl. That is OIC. That's why you absolutely cannot believe that you are a fan of the Cleveland Browns. What's happened with the Bengals this season and what's happened with Odell Beckham Jr. this season. Nobody outside of Cleveland can truly understand it, especially if you haven't been born and raised here as a sports fan. So now we have to have Odell Beckham Jr. in our face for the next 2 weeks. And we've already heard from Beckham in a story about Von Miller that he told Von Miller, according to Sports Illustrated, that not to come to Cleveland this past offseason. Well, that's odd because his buddy Jarvis Landry was still on the team, and he was photographed getting ready for the 2021 season with his Browns gear and excited to be with Baker and all that other stuff. Well, now the reports are he was telling Von Miller, don't even bother to come here. Miller, of course, was moved from Denver to L.A. in season. And I know that Odell Beckham Jr. can be perceived as a villain in Cleveland because he quit on his team. And I'll listen to that argument. I will. But there is a part of me, it's pretty much a majority part now. It's probably 51-49, where I don't blame Beckham. I don't. I don't like him, but I don't blame him. Here he was, second year in Stefanski's system. He knew he didn't fit. When that fit didn't occur and when the touches weren't coming and he knew his quarterback was banged up and couldn't get him the ball anyway, he wasn't going to sit there and ride out a second season of inconsequential production and probably a season with Baker being as banged up as he was and not playing as well and not playing anywhere near the level that he did in 2020, probably a season that was headed to no playoffs. And he's like, I want out. Well, guess what? The Browns didn't have to grant him that. The Browns could have sat on him the entire season and said, you know what? We're going to pay you to sit at home. But the Browns didn't. They did right by the player, and Beckham got his wish. He forced his way out, and he got his wish. And now he's going to the Super Bowl while the Browns are sitting at home, while his buddy Jarvis Landry is sitting at home. And the Browns have uncertainty at quarterback because Baker Mayfield has left shoulder surgery and, 4 to 6 month recovery. Who knows what he's going to look like? Yeah, even if he comes back healthy next year, is he the same quarterback that he was in 2010 or even his rookie year of 2018? We don't know. Is the Stefanski system suddenly going to, sprout and be good again and create havoc for defenses? I don't know. All I know is Odell Beckham Jr. is with Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, and Aaron Donald, and Von Miller, and Jalen Ramsey, and they're going to the Super Bowl. So, yeah, I'm belly aching about OIC. And let me go, before we go to a break, one more thing regarding the Bengals. The Bengals cashed their opportunity this year to get to the Super Bowl. Now, they have one more leg to go, but at the very least, they got to the Super Bowl. The Browns failed to cash their opportunity last year. It's why I say in the NFL, when you get a chance, you have to maximize it. You have to take advantage of it. We heard last year, the Cleveland Browns had a great season. They got as far as they could. You couldn't have expected them to beat the Chiefs at Arrowhead. They weren't ready for this level yet. Just give them another year of seasoning and they'll be ready. No. That's not how the NFL works. The NFL giveth, the NFL taketh away. Last year, the NFL gaveth to the Browns with a soft schedule. They were able to pile up victories. They got into the playoffs. They got the benefit of some serious mishaps by Pittsburgh and capitalized, won the game. But then in Kansas City, you have to win that game. Why? Because Patrick Mahomes was knocked out in the third quarter with a concussion. And the final score was 22-17. All you needed if you were the Browns was 23 points and you win the game. You have to win that game. You can't sit there and go, well, that's all right. It was a good try. Nobody could have expected it. We'll be back better for it next year. When the opportunity presents itself, you must grab it. Look at the Bengals. They weren't, quote unquote, ready for prime time this year. They weren't ready to win an AFC North, but they did. And once they won the North, they weren't ready for the playoffs. They weren't a seasoned team like the Tennessee Titans or the Kansas City Chiefs or the Buffalo Bills. But guess what? They won. They won 3 games. When the opportunity presented itself to the Bengals, they grabbed it and ran with it, and they're one step away from a ring. That's the difference between the two teams in the two respective years, and that's why we say OIC. OIC that the Browns couldn't beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead in the divisional round when the Chiefs only scored 22. OIC that the Bengals can go from 4-11-1 to 10-7 AFC North title, win the wild card, win a division round, win an AFC title game. And the last 2 playoff wins were at Tennessee, number 1 seed, and at Kansas City, taking a full brunt of Patrick Mahomes. And down 21-3, came back to beat him. It's frustrating if you're a Browns fan. All right, when we return on the other side of the break, a little more talk about the Cleveland Browns, and then that'll be it.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen. Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
Hey everyone, I'm Holly Wetzel.
And I'm Jeremy Powell.
And we are your hosts of The Orange is Oranger, a Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. We give you all the dog pound coverage that you'll need each week to get you ready for kickoff and beyond.
Don't miss our breakdowns of each week's matchups, game recaps, and any and all news out of Berea to feed your Browns appetite. As we all know, Holly, dogs gotta eat.
That's right, Jeremy. Hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode of the Orange is Oranger Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network.
The R&R podcast going to be rocking and rolling with you because football season is underway. College, Ohio State, the Power Fives, the MAC, the Browns. Michael Regai, are you ready to rock and roll with some football?
Kenny, I've been ready. This is our time of year. This is what R&R is all about. We're going to be with you every week. Kenny just said it. Browns, NFL, Ohio State centric. So you got to stay with us all fall and winter long here on R&R.
That's right. The Regai and Rhoda podcast coming to you here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Subscribe now and don't miss a show.
Hey, I'm Jason.
And I'm Gary, and we love ball cards.
And if you love ball cards too, good news. You just found your new favorite podcast. From breaks to grading.
And from collecting to flipping, join us on the Ball Card Show.
The sports podcast for the sports collector.
Hello, Brooks here with the Books with Brooks monthly book club podcast. We read one book a month and then we talk about it. Books like Stephen King's The Shining or Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. If you're on the hunt for book recommendations and enjoy sparkling conversation, come read along with us and then listen in.
Hello, this is Don Mike Mendoza, the host of the Producing While Asian podcast. Join us to listen in on conversations with everyone who identify from producers to non-producers who all are part of the AAPI community. There's all that and more on the Producing While Asian podcast here on the Press Play Podcast Network.
This is Mike Voorhees, co-host of the Swingin' a Tribe MLB podcast. If you love Cleveland Indians baseball, then this is the pod for you. We've got you covered each week as we talk about all the games, breaking news, trades, the roster, all things Tribe. You're going to love it. Go Tribe.
Welcome back to the Dennis Manoloff Show, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. I'm your host, Dennis Manoloff. Across the screen from me is producer extraordinaire Jordan Powell. First segment, we talked about OIC, only in Cleveland. Do we have to see the Bengals play the Odell Beckham Rams? This segment, I want to say, first of all, thank you, NFL, for continuing to provide the greatest entertainment value in professional sports. I don't care what the footballers say, as in outdoor soccer. NFL is the best entertainment in the world, and it's incredible. Just the regular season was great enough, and then you had the playoffs, and they've been spectacular. I fully expect the Super Bowl to be amazing too. I do find it interesting, though, that COVID and Omicron suddenly disappeared when the NFL playoffs started. Did you notice that? Isn't it interesting? The last month of the regular season, when NFL teams were cobbling together rosters, they were grabbing guys off practice squads. All these big names were out because of illness or in danger of being out because of illness. And it was almost impossible to handicap weeks 15, 16, 17, and 18 in the NFL. Well, lo and behold, here come the playoffs. And honestly, have you heard anything about COVID? Heard anything about Omicron? Heard anything about health and safety protocols and guys potentially being testing positive? I haven't. I've asked around. Many people that I've spoken to haven't. Jordan Powell, have you heard anything?
I have not, and I was actually thinking the same thing.
Think about it.
I'm envisioning the next 2 weeks before the Super Bowl. I'm curious, are we going to hear anything? Because we haven't heard anything in a month.
It's great. It's almost like Roger Goodell spoke to the person called Omicron and said, hey, Omicron, you're going to stop bothering us for a month and a half here while we conduct our playoffs. And then whatever you have to do. And I'm not trying to make light of Omicron and the COVID, but the fact of the matter is it was such a problem in the NFL. And then all of a sudden it wasn't. And you don't hear any big names potentially being sidelined. And I don't think you will in the run up to the Super Bowl, as Jordan pointed out. But the NFL has a lot of power. And I mean, I don't know. Are they testing and just not looking at the test results, or are they running are they running a straight on us and basically all negative tests for every player? I mean, maybe there have been COVID lists and I just haven't seen them, but it's incredible that there's been no mention of it by any of the announcers, nobody by any of the on-field reporters. I've watched hours and hours and hours and hours of postseason coverage by ESPN, Fox, NFL Network. Not one mention of COVID during the playoffs. So it's absolutely crazy. And I want to finish this particular pod with lessons that we've learned from the postseason so far. And I know that overreaction often takes place from fan bases where the teams, did not make the playoffs. You say, oh, look at this, look at these playoff teams. They're on such a different level. Well, that's true in the moment, but then you realize as the season gets started subsequent to that, the next season, you realize, okay, well, maybe they're not as far off as we thought. But what this postseason in particular has shown me, and I'm not saying it hasn't been shown in other postseasons, but really it's been hammered home this year. Quarterbacks matter. Quarterbacks who lead matter. Quarterbacks who have arm talent matter. That doesn't mean just throwing the ball through a wall. You have to be able to manipulate the ball. You have to have various touches. You have to loop the ball. You have to zing the ball. You have to throw into postage stamp windows. Quarterbacks who get the ball down the field matter. Coaches with wide open playbooks matter. And wide open playbooks, I mean, it doesn't mean trick plays left and right. It means creativity, not necessarily trick plays. Downfield passing games must be in the mix. If you don't have them, then you are probably not going to succeed in today's NFL postseason. Maybe you can win games in the regular season with run-based attacks or tight end attacks or whatever you want to do, tight ends, running backs, short passing game. But if you want to win in the playoffs, you need a wide open passing game. You need a diversified passing game. You need deep threats. And to that end, wide receivers matter. You better have wide receivers who can run fast. You better have wide receivers who are elusive, who can get open deep, who can get open short. The Browns are lacking in a lot of these areas. Their quarterback, to me, does not pass the smell test when you look at Josh Allen of the Bills, Patrick Mahomes of the Chiefs, Joe Burrow of the Bengals, Justin Herbert of the Chargers, to name just four in the AFC. He might not even pass the smell test vis-a-vis Lamar Jackson. Jackson's already won an MVP. Derek Carr might stay in the AFC. So when I look at the best quarterbacks in the AFC, three of whom were on display in this year's playoffs, Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, I just don't see Baker in that category. And so the Browns have a long way to go there. Baker has to come back healthy and show something, because if he doesn't, the Browns are spinning their wheels. If the Browns think that they're going to be a ground-based attack, a tight end heavy attack in today's NFL, they're sorely mistaken. Maybe you get to the playoffs that way, but I doubt it anymore. Now with Burrow in town, atop the AFC North. But let's say I give you that your reliance on the run and your reliance on tight ends is going to get you to a certain point in the regular season. It's not going to win playoff games. You got to have dynamic quarterback play, dynamic receiver play to win playoff games. And you know what else matters in the postseason? Kickers, special teams. The Packers, you could argue, lost their number one seed, lost their game against the Niners in the divisional round because of their special teams. The Cleveland Browns special teams were awful this year. And I hope that the Browns brass looks at what's going on with other teams, the teams that have won playoff games, and said, our special teams are nowhere near what theirs are. The Browns need a kicker like Evan McPherson. They need a kicker. I know it's Evan McPherson's hard to get. I get it because he's so good. Justin Tucker. Think about that. The Browns have to look at Evan McPherson and Justin Tucker in their division. Tucker's arguably the greatest kicker in the history of the game, other than Vinatieri. And he shows no signs of slowing down for Baltimore. And now you got Evan McPherson, the rookie out of Florida, drafted by the Bengals, and he's awesome. Those are two of the best kickers in the game, and they're both playing in the AFC North. You have to punt, you have to kick, you have to kick return, you have to punt return, you have to cover. The Browns need an overhaul in their special teams. They can't just patch this and patch that. They need an overhaul. So I hope that the Browns have been paying attention to this postseason and see what a guy like McPherson does, or a guy like, Matthew Gay does with the Rams, or, who am I missing here? Carlson of the Raiders, as good as he is. And, there was another guy that was hitting bombs. Oh, Robbie Gould from the 49ers. So special teams do matter. As sexy as quarterback play is, wide receivers, whatever, defensive ends, you got to have good special teams. And that's where I hope the Browns take notice. One final note. Looks all but certain that the Raiders are going to hire Josh McDaniels as their head coach. And it's interesting because the reports are that McDaniels will be hired by the Raiders as head coach, and Patriots director of player personnel Dave Ziegler will be hired as GM. If that's true, and we have no reason to believe it's not, that should shed light on what happened with McDaniels in the offseason entering 2020. When the Browns had him in for a full day and then he left. I think it's fair to assume, and I know if you assume, you can cause problems for yourself. But based on the fact that Ziegler is GM now of the Raiders and McDaniels is head coach, pretty clear that McDaniels wanted his own people to be installed in the Browns front office. And that probably meant that Paul DePodesta had to go. DePodesta was there. He was a holdover from the previous regime. He was the numbers cruncher. Was it COO or CFO or something like that? And when the Haslam said, no, we're not going to move off of DePodesta, you can't bring in your own guys in the front office, then I think that's when McDaniels packed his bags and said, thank you, I appreciate it, but I'm back to Belichick in New England. The Raiders said, we will give you what you want on the GM side of it, whereas the Browns wouldn't. That's my guess in reading the tea leaves. And was it a mistake? I mean, who knows? Because right now, to me, the jury's out on Kevin Stefanski. Really good first year, coach of the year, really bad second year. So he's got a lot of proving to do still. Is Josh McDaniels the right guy? We'll find out, at least for the Raiders. He wasn't the right guy in Denver. He bagged on Indianapolis before, he could sign there and then bailed. Never coached for him. So we'll see. But I'm just saying that I think now we have a clearer picture of how things not unraveled, because I don't want to make it sound like it was a disaster, but how the two sides parted ways is the way to put it, I think. All right. Thank you very much for listening. Really appreciate it. We'll talk to everybody soon.